So April, thanks for coming in today. Can you think of a time when you've been involved in a ministry here at St. Mark's that's had a really meaningful impact on your life?
There's been many in my time here, but most recently when we went on pilgrimage over the summer in July, when we went to New Orleans, it was a very nerve-wracking experience, but it turned out to be the most spiritually moving experience I've had since I've been here.
Can you tell me a little bit about the background and some information about the pilgrimage?
Sure. So the Rite 13 and Journey to Adulthood classes spend years preparing for this big journey that they go on. It's usually around 10 days. Ours was 10 days. And there are multiple components to the event. There has to be a component of spirituality. There has to be a component of community building, team building, and there has to be a component of service that go into the planning. And so we decided that we wanted the children to experience disaster recovery. We decided to go to New Orleans. There were votes on a couple different places, and we decided on New Orleans. And they are still recovering from Katrina. They are still dealing with endemic poverty. They're still dealing with horrible, horrible racism issues. And we partnered with a great organization and stayed at a Methodist church down there. The kids fundraised for a few years. We did a lot of planning for the fun parts, a lot of planning for the work parts, and a lot of planning for the spirit parts. But we weren't sure how it was going to work. Prior to this, all pilgrimages had been sort of prepackaged, and we planned this from the ground up. And so we weren't sure if it was going to fly. We weren't sure if it was going to go. And the results were incredible.
So what was your role in the J2A group?
I was the leader along with you.
Yeah, that's right.
What actually happened with the teens that was so meaningful?
Well, we come from a more higher income area. We come from an area where there's not a lot of visual poverty that isn't homelessness. We deal with the homeless. We go to Church Without Walls. We've done the loaves and fishes, making dinner. So the kids see homelessness, and we collect food for the hungry, but we're kept out of this sort of genteel poverty where people have a home to speak of, and they're still working and they're still going to work, but they're not making ends meet, and they're living in really bad conditions, but really close to people who are living in very, very good conditions. And the kids don't get to see that very often. So when we were down there, we worked with a Methodist group, like I said, and they got a background speech. They got to meet other teams from around the country, other church teams from around the country. And the other thing that they got to do is they got to go on a tour of homes that are falling down. Our first work site, we weren't allowed to work at it because there was raw sewage coming out of the back of the building. And it was a mobile home. And when the family came out, it was a young couple who had a little girl still in diapers coming out with them, and found out that the work that they were expecting to finally have done on their falling down trailer wasn't getting done because they had raw sewage. So they had to deal with the embarrassment of seeing the people there to volunteer having to leave because they had unsafe conditions, and yet their daughter was living there with them. And so that was a very, very, very immediate wake-up call for our group.
So do you want to tell them a little bit about Miss Wilma?
So that first day, we ended up working around the site we were staying at just because we didn't have another project lined up. But then for the rest of the week, we went to this amazing, amazing woman's house. Her name was Miss Wilma. She's about 80, and she is the primary caretaker for her 2 grandchildren and her unwell daughter, who has some significant mental health issues, and Ms. Wilma herself has dementia and is the primary caretaker for the 2 children that are there full time. However, she has an amazing, amazing spirit, an amazing outlook on life. She feels like she's been blessed, even though her house has the worst termite infestation that the exterminator had ever seen in his life. You can feel it moving when you walk because it's about to fall down. The footings are completely rotted on the house. The settlement of the foundation caused a giant crack, like 2.5 inches thick in the wall. There's just no fixing this house, but there's nowhere else for the family to go. So the Epworth Project, the group that we worked with, scrapes together funds because she doesn't actually qualify for any disaster relief funds. They scrape together funds and supplies to go over and help wherever they can, just to make the house livable until she passes, because there's nowhere else for her to go. She welcomed us in. She chatted with us. She talked about her life. She talked about how the house was put together by her grandfather through pieces that he collected and put together, because he was an interracial marriage when interracial marriages weren't accepted. She talked about some of the not great pieces of her life, the abuse from her ex-husband, the struggle she's had with her own children. I think one of her sons is in jail. She got a call from him while he was in prison. It's just multiple things. But yet, she greeted us with a smile every single day. Her grandkids played with our teams. It was just an incredible, incredible experience.
What do you think was spiritually moving for the teens on this pilgrimage?
A couple things. I think that Ms. Wilma's faith in God was a big, big thing for the kids, because she talked about how blessed she was from God. And it really made the kids think about all the complaints that they would have about things that really didn't mean anything when they had so little but believed so much and felt so, so blessed. That was one big piece of it. The other thing was our church-going experience was, I think, very moving for them. We went to St. Anna's right in downtown New Orleans, and the preacher was wonderful. Not to take anything away from our preacher, but the preacher was amazing. And the kids all felt really engaged in the church service. They stopped in the middle of the service and welcomed our group. They invited us to share a meal with them afterwards. The whole community was incredibly, incredibly welcoming. On top of that, there was a wall outside of the church that remembered all the murder victims and how they died for the year. And the list is updated every year. And just the ages, the ways of death, the sheer number of murders that had been happening down there were staggering for us as adults, but definitely for the kids. And they prayed for them during the service, and they talked about all the outreach that they do to go out and try to make a difference in the community. So I think that was a big thing. And then just some of the real life reflections that they don't have to deal with on a regular basis, I think really hit them.
For you personally, how did you grow spiritually and find blessing in this experience?
Well, it's the first time that I've led a group on a trip like this. And, I'm pretty comfortable in my role. I've been with this group since they were in 6th grade, and some of them were just graduated seniors. And I have a good rapport, I think, with everybody. But this is the longest trip. It's 10 days. And, airlines and traveling through a city that has some real danger issues, and all the logistics that went into it. And I was very, very nervous about leaving my family, leaving and being in charge of them. For me, I felt that all the work that I've been doing really sort of culminated in this moment, and the sort of aha moments that the kids were having. I really felt like sometimes you feel, unfortunately, when you're talking to teenagers, like you're talking to a wall because you don't get a lot of responses back. And the kids, it felt like they really got it, everything that we've been working towards. And I felt like God was really sort of patting me on the back, that it wasn't falling on deaf ears over the last few years. And that was really, really wonderful, because sometimes I wonder if the work that we're doing is really achieving the goals that we're trying to achieve. And it was great.
Thank you so much for your time.
No problem.